Hello and a very warm welcome to all attendees of CTOCon 2023. The conference has been nothing short of amazing so far, and we're excited to continue the trend with another really insightful talk. Today, we will be delving into the critical topic of engineering for growth, and we'll be exploring the best strategies for scaling teams to meet the demands of growing organizations. As companies expand, they need to not only attract and retain the top engineering talent, but also maintain a high level of technical excellence, manage technical debt, and foster effective collaboration across the teams. Our discussion today will touch upon these important issues and offer insight into how engineering leaders can position themselves and they can position their teams for success in a rapidly changing landscape. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our esteemed panelists today. We have with us Hizam Sahibudeen, who is CTO at Newstore. Hizam, thank you so much for coming and thank you so much for your time. We
Thank
also have
you.
with us Cory Thomas, who is VP of Engineering at Secureframe. Cory, thanks so much for coming in. I'm honored to have both of you on the panel, and I'd love for you to introduce yourselves one by one, talk a little bit about yourself, about your company. Hizam, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Zain. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation. So my name is Hizam Sahibudeen. I am the CTO at Newstore. At Newstore, what we do is we provide an omni-channel platform as a service for retail brands that are striving to unify their digital and their physical. So our target customers are direct-to-consumer brands that bring over 100 million GMV with about 50 to 200 stores. And we provide them the capabilities to operate the entire store on an iPhone. And our fully cloud-based platform gives functionalities such as mobile POS systems, order management systems, clienteling, personalization, inventory management, as well as consumer application for consumers to interact with the associates at the store. So today I lead about 150 members across the US and Europe. And I am part of the executive team, so I provide leadership in engineering as well as leadership from a company strategic perspective.
Thank you so much, Azam. It's an honor to have you. We'll move on to Cory.
Yeah, for sure. Happy to be here. This is great. So I'm Cory Thomas. I'm the VP of Engineering at Secureframe, and Secureframe is a security compliance company. So our mission is really to empower businesses to build trust with all of their businesses and customers through compliance and security.
And without further ado, we will jump right into the topic and we'll start with the first question. So, Hizam, we'll start with you. My first question is: as engineering teams scale, what are some of the key challenges they may face in terms of maintaining quality and consistency in their work? Like, what are some of the strategies that engineering
Mhm.
leaders can ensure that standards are upheld and quality is maintained, even as the team grows and as new members keep on getting added?
Very good. I think there are lots of different types of challenges, and the challenges may change depending on the phase of the company, right? Scaling may mean different things depending on which state of the company we are currently in. So I'll probably highlight three main challenges that I've experienced in my current position at Newstore while we're scaling, and one is conflicting priorities. There's always going to be priorities that conflict each other and race for the same position. Second is interdependencies between teams and across the organization. As you scale, there's going to be more and more members contributing towards a common goal, and oftentimes that may introduce some conflicts during that interdependencies. And the third one is the balancing an effort towards stability, resilience, versus growth and innovation. Because now you're much bigger, you're not going to be as nimble and flexible as you may have been when you were smaller. So there will be times where growth and innovation would have to compete a little bit towards making sure the platform is scalable, it's stable, and it's resilient to the growing number of customers that you start to onboard.
Yeah, so there's a lot to that question. I mean, around quality, what usually ends up happening on a smaller team as you scale up is there's a lot of new people added. So definitely understanding the area that they work in is a big deal. I think part of this is developing a very solid written culture at the company, making sure that you're documenting as much as possible, that you're writing things down, because as you're growing and as you're scaling, new people are coming in and they need to get up and running very quickly. So this all goes into onboarding new folks. So very important to really try and instill and adopt a written culture. The other thing is making sure as you are growing and scaling that you have the right people in the right places. So oftentimes when you start out and you have a very small team, you have everyone doing everything, wearing multiple hats, filling multiple roles. There's going to come a time when you have to add new functions to your engineering org. So things like maybe a growth team, SREs, a true DevOps team, QA. So really, as an engineering leader, you need to be very cognizant of when the right time is to slow down a little bit, and bring in these other functions that are going to help stability across the application, and to also make sure that everything is covered, because a lot of things start to get missed or dropped if everyone's doing everything at once. And then I would say one more thing that I would add to that is just really developing from the onset a very strong culture of ownership, making sure that people have a lot of pride and ownership around what they are building and the area they're owning. And the reason that you want this, obviously, you want people to be engaged, and to deeply understand what they're doing. But the other thing is that pride and ownership will help people raise issues very quickly. So as new things are coming up and it's like, hey, we need to get this thing out very quickly. Some engineers may look at it that have strong ownership around the area and say, you know what, we can do this, but here are some of the sacrifices if we do that. Here's what we're giving up. Here are some of the issues we may introduce if we do it this way. Maybe we need to take a step back, look at how this is being done, and re-architect some things along the way before we continue.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. So I'll move on to my next question, and we'll talk about like different stages of a company, right? And the transition from moving from a startup to a big company, like a proper company, where you deal with more complex problems and more complex organizational structures, right? How can engineering teams effectively manage that transition? And what are some of the strategies that leaders can use to preserve that entrepreneurial spirit that exists
Mhm.
within startups, that
Right.
while building the processes that are required for this growth?
Very good question. I think it also differs from company to company, from industry to industry, and the type of problems that you're actually trying to solve, right? I think it's never going to be the same kind of process two different companies that would go through. So the biggest challenge with or suggestion that what we did while navigating through these challenges is to start out by making sure there are clear boundaries between the different teams, right? Because when you're a startup, I tend to say it's a little bit more of an anarchism. Like everyone is super passionate, doing whatever it takes to solve a problem. And it's easier to do that when you have 20 people, 25, 50 people in a room where everyone can see each other and work together. But as you grow from that 50 to 100 to 250 or 300 people, that just becomes not possible anymore where everybody's talking to each other. So you definitely need to create structure in the engineering organization. One of the things that I've adopted and have implemented with my engineering teams is based out of the book Team Topologies. So there are different type of teams. You have stream-aligned teams versus platform teams versus enabling teams versus complex subsystem teams. So once you define the various different types of teams, you want to then divide them according to the most logical business contexts. You don't have to overthink them because it does also change. The context itself would change over time, but you want to have it nicely defined so then the teams are now empowered to go and solve the customer's problem. So when they are empowered to solve the customer problems, they will do whatever it takes to solve in a smaller group rather than trying to depend on everyone. So the more you grow, the more you scale. This should be a moving system where you fine tune and refine the context and the boundaries. And when there are contentions, you fix those boundaries and allow the teams to split out. So it's kind of similar to what Conway's law say, right? Like your organization will design its system based on the communication path. So if you introduce a more communication path to it, the more complex the design becomes. So if you can break the communication part to as many as possible, almost like a distributed microservice kind of architecture, then you remove a lot of those complexities.
Thanks, Hizam. We'll ask the same question from Cory.
Yeah, so growing is, this is always a big challenge in that transitional phase where everyone's doing everything. You start adding more people and you start becoming a real company or a real engineering org, and you start to have real product market fit and things become very serious pretty quickly. So I would say a couple of things that you want to introduce at that time is definitely more effort and emphasis on optimization and continual improvement, right? So to do that, to understand where you have to improve, you need to be tracking correct metrics. And there's a lot of things that you can do. A lot of people use DORA metrics for this. So definitely tracking things like how frequently you're deploying, how long it takes to deploy something, how long it takes when something enters the pipeline, a new piece of work, to when it goes outside the pipeline, the lead time for changes. When you have issues and outages, how long does it take to recover from those? How many bugs are you introducing, like change failure rate? How many issues are you introducing into production? So very important to start tracking some of those metrics. I would also suggest that teams start experimenting with how they work, their product development lifecycle or software development lifecycle. Really start digging into that with retrospectives, understanding weekly, making small changes, but doing it very frequently. So really continuous improvement, but very frequently with their processes. And feel free to experiment with things as you're growing. Like you're not going to stick with one, find it off right off the bat and stick with that as your team scales from like 10 to 50 to 100 engineers. It's going to constantly be evolving. But I would say definitely experiment with those things. The other thing I would be very cognizant of, again, is just doing too many things, right? So you might want to think about implementing something like a one piece or single piece flow, where only one thing enters the pipeline, one piece of work at any one time. To expand this out to a team, you could say, the team is only going to work on one single thing. This is all they're going to do for a 2-week period, and they're not going to do anything else. Or depending on the size of the team, two things, but really limiting the work in progress. So you're not doing too many things and scrambling, and understanding how you increase your velocity, doing less, and then slowly start adding more in, and then increase it, and then changing some of the processes to adapt to that.
How can leaders in engineering ensure that their teams are equipped with the necessary skills, resources, and tools
Mhm.
to handle increased workload and maintain high quality work? Right. And what role does training and professional development play in building these skills and capabilities?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so as we talked about earlier, like I had mentioned, I think in the first question, as your team grows, you're going to need new skills, right, coming in. So things like DevOps, QA, etc. There's a couple of ways to do this. One way is to hire. This often becomes, I think, a problem for some companies, and I think we're seeing this a lot in tech right now, where there's this over hiring, and we're sort of paying for that, paying the price for that. But I think we tend to say in tech, the path has always been, we need another person, we need another body, we need someone else to come in who has this skill. And do it, rather than sort of training up people that are already there. So I think it's important to look internally first. If you are adopting new technology, let's say it's data, and you're working with data pipelines, data warehouses, or whatever, before you go out and hire someone like that, you may want to look internally and say, do we have an engineer that has an interest in this? Is this something they want to grow into, right? Is this something they would be interested in doing for the long term, and see if you can find that internally. The other thing I think is very important when you're talking about growth is really establishing um, a very good leveling system across engineering, right, for the different roles, but really good role profiles that explain what it means to be a junior developer, senior engineer, staff level, whatever. really defining that well. Now, it's not a checkbox list. It's not something someone looks at and says, oh, here are all of the things that I should be doing. I have to do these exact things. But it's a very strong guide in terms of what is expected at your level and what you would need to get to the next level. And that is where I also think you need to build some training programs around. At Secureframe, one of the things we do around this is we have an internal mentorship program in engineering. So essentially, you know, if someone is a senior engineer and they want to go to a staff engineer, they can leverage that internal mentorship program to work with staff engineers and figure out, like, what do they do day to day? You know, what are some of the skills that I need to develop? Here's where I'm talking to my manager and they say I should do more of this. How would I go about that? So I think trying to, and this is something you may not do early on in a company's life, but maybe, you know, once you're a few years in and you start developing these things, I really think an internal mentorship program can help a lot. We tend to often look again outside and say, oh, someone needs training outside, or they should take a course outside of the company. But there's often a lot of skills and value inside that you can leverage too.
I think it's all about measuring the right metrics, right? As leaders, I don't think you could apply the same rule to every team. It's not everybody's going to be the same, right? There are going to be different skill sets, different maturity, different knowledge in different teams. So you want to measure the right metrics for the individual teams. And if you're lucky enough to have teams that are autonomous and empowered to solve the problem, then the objectives and goal may also differ depending on that particular team. I personally have employed some of the metrics as described in the DORA organization, the DORA metrics. So mean time to recover is one of them, lead time to change, deployment frequency, change failure rate. And I also measure the throughput or the investment profile of the team, like how much of time is spent on functionality, how much of time is spent on supporting tickets, you know, like support tickets that come in, how much time is spent on, for example, bugs. And then also the other thing that we as leaders try to do is to guide the teams to a common company-wide objective. So we also do some form of an OKR where collectively as the executive team, we come up with what we call the three main big rocks. It does not mean that's the only thing everybody does, but it's the big rocks that we provide guidance and direction to the teams in terms of where the company needs to go. But the teams are also having to work with pebbles and sands in between, right? So that's that. On top of that, we also measure the team health. It's based on like a weekly, daily like check-ins, like how do you feel this week? Do you feel happy? Do you feel not happy? So that opens up a conversation. So we use a metric to measure that. We also have employee engagement tools that we use to constantly ask questions about how things are going. So that these are some of the things that we do. On the development side of things, I think it's absolutely necessary, right? We have a very robust quarterly development plan for everybody. So based on your career level, roles and responsibilities, every quarter we walk through your development plan. What are the expectations from a particular member on a particular career level? What are the development areas that we want to focus on and help this member on? We also dedicate training budget for each and everybody in the team so that they are able to go and learn new skill sets or go to a training conference, etc., using the budget that we've given them.
Yeah, very well said. And it's been going really well within our company as well. Like we've designated a special L&D budget, and any engineer can purchase any course. That was a real hit within our team. They loved it.
Right. One other thing, if you're not, so we do that, obviously we do, but we also have internal learnings, which is actually free. I mean, in theory, it's not that free because you dedicate time for everybody to learn and teach with each other. So every week on Wednesday from 5 to 6:30, I call it a knowledge sharing session. So the entire engineering organization takes turns, one or two people take turn to share knowledge, whatever knowledge it is. It can be about work. It can be also be nothing about work, but it's to promote the culture of sharing a knowledge. It's a teaching and learning environment that I promote.
That's absolutely great, and it's a culture once again. So our similar platform is called the Knowledge Circle. Takes place every
Mm-hmm.
Thursday at 6 p.m. And it's
Mm-hmm.
the exact same concept. Like senior engineers come in, they talk to the junior engineers, they talk about what they've worked on, so on and so forth. Yeah, that has also been going really well for us. So.
Very nice.
I'd like to talk a little bit about the future, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what are some of the emerging technologies or practices that are shaping the future of engineering, right? And how can organizations best prepare for and take advantage of these changes
Mm-hmm.
to support
I
their growth?
think right. So it once again depends on the business industry. Newstore is an enterprise platform provider, so we deal with very large enterprises, and they have invested a lot of money when they come on board a platform like Newstore. So there's long sales cycles. In the process, we also have very legacy traditional systems that we have to integrate with. And oftentimes there's also a bit of a sales driven kind of mindset, right? So one of the tools that we've adopted is to migrate from a pure sales driven growth to a little bit more of a product led growth so that it's a bit of a hybrid. So the first initial initiation may probably be a bit more sales driven, but after the initiation, it immediately converts into a product led growth so that we're disrupting and innovating and helping the customer by solving the right problems for them. So that's what has been one of the framework we used. We've also used frameworks prescribed by Marty Kagan in his books in Empowered and Inspired. You know how product teams are really a group of people that are consisting of product managers, engineering leaders, and engineering members, and even other cross-functional members from sales, marketing, go-to-market, coming together and really focusing on solving the customer problem. And it consists of four different areas. Right? One is, are we solving a problem that brings value to the customer? The second is it viable? Is it actually does a job for the customer so that they're willing to pay for it? Is it feasible? Is that something we can build realistically, or shall we need to partner with someone to solve this problem? And the final one is around usability. Is it intuitive to be used? So that's another framework. Another one that we've also employed recently is data mesh and distributing the ownership of data. In the past, I've experienced where data is often centralized, and it becomes hard to make decisions when data is centralized because it just takes a little bit longer for the data to be modeled, crunched, and eventually used by teams. So we employ a more of a data mesh distributed ownership kind of model where every team would push data into a central infrastructure so that they can themselves go and model their data and immediately get the data back into their teams so they can make very informed decisions around what to do next. More recently, it has been a bit of a buzz and a hype around generative AI. So we're still exploring how generative AI can influence decision making based on the data that we have. And maybe one last technology or framework that we've also heavily adopted is Backstage IO. So it's an automated platform to document our entire infrastructure and architecture, so that when new members join, it takes them a lot quicker to onboard. Because when you document things, it tend to very quickly get outdated. With Backstage IO, it's embedded to your source code, so it constantly gets updated on its own, and you can keep adding things to it so that it becomes a very good onboarding and knowledge sharing system.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for sharing that, Hizam. That's really valuable information. Same question from Cory.
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, there's a lot of things that are out there. I guess one of the hottest things, of course, right now is AI. That's everywhere, and I don't see it going away. It's only going to grow. You know, you see Chat GPT. I think Google's releasing something called Bard, or it's out now. That's a competitor to Chat GPT. So that's definitely to me going to be the future. Where I think that is very interesting, though, is how we leverage AI. So most of it, as we've seen so far, has been a lot of question answer type of things, chat bots, things like that, where it's like ask a question, get something back. Chat GPT has taken that a step further, where you can actually give, the AI tasks, and based on, its knowledge, it can fulfill those tasks for you. I think one of the big things companies are going to have to do is figure out how they should leverage that type of technology for themselves, but that fits their business, right? So it doesn't mean, oh, we should have a chatbot or something that emulates something else. How does it actually fit? So I can give you a good example of what we've done with it at Secureframe. We have a product that's called Secureframe questionnaires. And essentially, you will get, you're in a business and you have a customer, and they will often send you a long questionnaire in many different formats. It could be Excel, some kind of spreadsheet is usually what it is, of a bunch of security questions. And there could be, 100 questions on there that they need filled out, right? What we've done is we've developed something where you can upload that questionnaire into Secureframe, and it'll automatically be filled out for you based on your policies, based on information you have in Secureframe, based on your frameworks you have, SOC 2, whatever. All of that information is compiled and put in. So I think it's very important for companies to understand how they should be leveraging that. Where I think it's going to be super interesting for me, where this would be taken, is more in the area of decision making. And I don't think we've seen a lot of AI yet really help, other than ChatGPT a little bit. We haven't gotten very deep into this idea of AIs making decisions and helping businesses speed their decisions, right? So they can improve like the accuracy of decisions, I think the effectiveness of decisions, improve consistency with decision making by feeding it a lot of data. So I think that to me is the most interesting part, is really speeding up decisions, how we can leverage it to do that in business.
And I'd like to move on to the final question for the panel. Unfortunately, I was having a great time, but all good things must come to an end. So we have a quote here from Tim House where he says, "I've scaled engineering teams in various stages of euphoria and horror." Right?
Mhm.
My question to you is, how can engineering teams scale in these economic times, right? It's really, really bad out there for all tech companies. So how do you balance the two? Because the need for innovation doesn't stop. As soon as a company
Correct.
stops innovating, the company stops existing,
Right,
right?
right, right.
And to innovate, you need to build. To build, you need to scale. So it's all like, how do you balance that out?
It's a very, very good point, right? I think end of the day, success is defined by if you have customers, it's your customers, right? If you don't have customers, I do think it's sometimes a lot easier. Like sometimes there's this perception that okay, it's hard to go from that 0 to 1, the startup phase. It is hard, but then after that, it's also hard to keep growing because now you have customers, and every time there's a problem, the screaming becomes louder and louder. When you don't have customers, no one is screaming at you, right? You're just going in finding a customer, right? So that's where the balance becomes tricky. So our core principle is whatever we do, we do not want to forget our customers, our existing customers, because our existence is based on them being there. So sometimes there's this need like, can we go faster, right? But it doesn't mean going faster is constantly crunching out new features. It can also mean quickly resolving a customer problem or quickly addressing their needs, which may also refer to the stability and the scalability of the platform. So in this current climate, it will be challenging because the environment may not have the risk appetite for innovation and growth per se. So the real focus needs to be, again, in this particular climate, what are the challenges your customers are going through? What are the problems that they have? It may not be the same as what they may be having yesterday, right? Because the environment has changed. So we got to be nimble and hungry enough to go and redefine the problems that the customer may have today due to the economic changes, and then be nimble enough to change how we work to adapt to the new needs of these customer problems. So as much as I mentioned earlier, teams are autonomous, they're divided into different subcontexts and domains. The leadership now plays a huge role. And I talk about leadership as an upside down tree. It's a supporting structure for all the teams, right? And And the communication path is mostly vertical, but sometimes it's also horizontal. So when there is a new need or change happens, the leadership needs to assess how do we navigate the entire organization to refocus in the most important things. So what we tend to do is on a quarterly basis, depending on the customer needs, depending on the environment, depending on the economic situation, our OKRs will change, obviously, right? So it needs to be very, very crisp. What is the current problem? What are the big rocks that we go after? And the entire company then rallies around it. But at the same time, we have the day-to-day stuff that we need to continue doing, which is keeping the lights on and catering to the existing customers. So it was kind of a long way of what I'm trying to say here, right? Innovation doesn't go away, but it may change to a different type of innovation.
Very well said, and that's a fantastic way of looking at it. Like you don't stop innovating, but you focus your innovation on solving the problems of the customers who are already keeping the lights on, as you said. This was really fantastic information. Thank you for sharing. We'll have the same question from Cory.
Yeah, that's a good one. So I think what we're seeing is, and this isn't just an engineering thing. I think though what we're seeing is really focusing on in the business as a whole efficiencies, right? I think what we've seen across some of these bigger companies is, we've seen all the layoffs, we've seen them scale back, but we haven't actually seen outward facing to their customers anyway, a deep impact to the quality of what they deliver. So I think they're finding ways to do more or do the same with less. And I think it's as basic as that to me, is that a lot of organizations really have to start thinking about, do I really need certain functions, and how much do I actually do? So I think for most of them, it has to be maniacal focus on the most important things, and that goes for engineering and any department in the org. What are the most important things that I should be doing? And to me, that starts with, at the very top of the business, having a set of goals or a set of OKRs, objectives that you want to achieve, and everything at a very small set, three at most, I would say. For some companies, three may be too many, and everything laddering up to that, and having that intense focus on those things, and not getting so consumed with a bunch of other things that don't matter and don't move the needle, essentially. For engineering in particular, there's always this focus on cost savings and cost to serve, like how much does it cost to serve our customer? So I think revisiting a lot of those things around cost to serve is making sure you have that very tight in your DevOps, in your ops organization, is a big deal too.
And that is unfortunately all the time we have today. Hizam and Cory, it was an absolute pleasure having you here. This was fantastic. The audience, this was really, really good for them. So thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for sharing your invaluable experiences with us.
Thank you, Zain, and thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. Have a great rest of your day. Bye bye.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye.